The Galactic Council's Grand Chamber fell silent as Archon Zwyxtal rose from their crystalline throne. Their bioluminescent appendages pulsed with barely contained excitement as they addressed the assembled representatives of the 1,000 most advanced civilizations in the known universe. "We have discovered something unprecedented," the Archon's translator echoed across the vast chamber. "A species that achieved faster-than-light travel through brute force experimentation rather than elegant mathematical proofs. A species that expanded across their local cluster not through careful planning, but through what they call trial and error. A species that has survived despite their horrifically inefficient decision-making processes." Murmurs rippled through the chamber as holographic displays activated, showing the Earth and its colonies. The gathered representatives observed with a mixture of fascination and horror as humanity's chaotic history played out before them. Admiral James Ramirez stood at perfect attention before the United Earth government's emergency session, his weathered face betraying none of the tension he felt. As Earth's first representative to the Galactic Council, he had just returned with news that would change humanity's place in the cosmos forever. "They want what?" President Nadia Patel's voice cut through the chamber's whispers. "A strategist, Madam President. The Galactic Council is conducting what they call the Millennium Tournament. Each spacefaring civilization is invited to send their finest military mind to compete in a series of increasingly complex strategic challenges. The winner species will be granted a seat on the Council's inner circle." "And why," asked Secretary of Defense Dmitry Volkov, "would they invite us? We've barely had FTL capability for 50 years. Ramirez allowed himself a small smile. "Because, Mr. Secretary, they're fascinated by us. Our military history, in particular, has them disturbed. They've never encountered a species that developed so many different forms of warfare, or one that continued to innovate in combat despite achieving peace among themselves." The chamber erupted in discussion, but President Patel raised her hand for silence. "What aren't you telling us, Admiral? The Council believes we'll fail spectacularly, Madam President. They expect our participation to serve as an object lesson in why their methodical, logical approach to civilization is superior. They think we're savages who got lucky with technology." The President's eyes narrowed. "And what do you think, Admiral?" "I think they've made a serious mistake in judgment, ma'am. They've spent millennia perfecting single strategies, optimizing them to mathematical perfection. But they've never had to adapt to an enemy who doesn't play by their rules. They've never faced anything like us." Across Earth and its colonies, the search began. The Council had given them one standard galactic month to choose their representative. The alien races expected them to select their most decorated commander or their most brilliant military theorist. Instead, humanity did what it had always done, it looked for someone who could think differently. In a quiet office at the Luna Strategic Command, General Thulani Okoro reviewed the candidates. Traditional military commanders, game theory experts, and AI specialists filled his displays. But one file kept drawing his attention back. "Tell me about Blackwood again," he said to his aide. "Admiral Helena Blackwood, retired, sir. Former commander of the Outer Rim Defense Fleet. Her record is unusual." "Unusual how?" "She was originally a historian specializing in ancient Earth warfare before joining the fleet. She's published controversial papers suggesting that humanity's greatest military advantage is our inability to stick to a single doctrine. Her tactics during the asteroid belt crisis were considered unorthodox but highly effective." Okoro leaned back, studying the image of a woman in her late 50s with sharp eyes and silver-streaked black hair. "Unorthodox how?" "She used mining ships as impromptu weapons platforms, sir. Converted civilian vessels into decoys. When pirates threatened the outer colonies, she had her ships execute combat maneuvers based on ancient naval warfare techniques that confused the enemy's targeting systems. The pirates' AI couldn't predict tactics that were thousands of years old." A slow smile spread across Okoro's face. Get me a secure line to the president. I think we've found our strategist. In her small apartment overlooking the Martian capital of New Armstrong, Helena Blackwood was enjoying her retirement by writing her memoirs when the call came. As she listened to the president's offer, she felt a familiar surge of excitement that she thought she'd left behind years ago. "You want me to compete against the greatest military minds in the galaxy?" she asked, her voice calm despite her racing thoughts. "We want you to show them why humanity deserves to be taken seriously," President Patel replied. "Your entire career has been built on understanding that humanity's greatest strength isn't our technology or our numbers, but our ability to think in ways that other species consider irrational or impossible." Helena walked to her window, watching the massive environmental domes that protected the Martian city. Below, humans went about their lives, unaware that their species' future might hinge on what was about to happen. "When do I leave?" "The Council's tournament begins in 3 weeks. A ship will arrive tomorrow to take you to their headquarters in the Galactic Core. Admiral Ramirez will brief you on the protocols." Helena turned back to the screen, her expression determined. "Madam President, before I accept, I need to know one thing. Are we doing this to win, or are we doing this to prove a point?" President Patel's smile was sharp. "Admiral Blackwood, we're doing this to show the galaxy that underestimating humanity is the last mistake they'll ever make. Whether that's through winning or losing doesn't matter, what matters is that they never forget the lesson." Helena nodded, her mind already racing with possibilities. "Then I accept. But I'll need access to our historical military archives, particularly the unconventional warfare sections." "You'll have whatever you need. Good luck, Admiral. Show them what humanity can do." As the communication ended, Helena walked to her old uniform, still pressed and ready after all these years. The aliens wanted to see humanity's strategic capability. She would show them something they had never seen before, the complete unpredictability of human warfare, from Sun Tzu to modern space combat. The galaxy was about to learn why humanity had survived everything their harsh world had thrown at them. They were about to learn why adapting and overcoming was written into human DNA. Most importantly, they were about to learn that the most dangerous strategist isn't the one who knows all the rules, it's the one who knows exactly when to break them. The journey to the Galactic Core took 12 days in hyperspace, though Helena Blackwood spent most of it studying. The ship's AI had been loaded with every scrap of tactical and strategic information humanity had accumulated over its long history, from ancient battles to theoretical papers on cosmic warfare. The Galactic Council's headquarters emerged from the darkness like a fever dream made real. It wasn't a station or a planet, it was an entire solar system transformed into a seat of power. Dyson swarms harvested every photon of the local star, massive structures floated in perfect geometric patterns, and ships of impossible designs moved with mathematical precision. "Intimidating, isn't it?" Admiral Ramirez said, joining her at the observation deck. "They're fond of showing off their technological superiority." Helena's eyes narrowed as she watched the traffic patterns. "No, James. They're fond of showing off their predictability. Look at the shipping lanes, perfect spherical harmonics. Beautiful, efficient, and completely inflexible." The human vessel was directed to Dock 17 Lambda 4, a designation that meant nothing to Helena but apparently meant everything to the vast bureaucracy that managed the Council's affairs. As she stepped onto the station, gravity shifted subtly, not Earth normal, but something else, something that felt engineered to be precisely optimal. A delegation waited for them. 3 aliens, each more bizarre than the last. The tallest was a VX-Cath, a species that had evolved from something like Earth's cephalopods. Besides them stood a meridian, their crystalline body refracting light in complex patterns that served as their primary form of communication. The third was a Zinco, a being of pure energy contained within an engineered humanoid form. "Welcome to the center of civilization," the VX-Cath said through their translator. "I am Strategic Overlord NX Thal. These are my colleagues, Grand Theorist Prisma and Battle Director Unity, 7. Helena bowed slightly, exactly 15 degrees, the protocol briefing had been very specific about this. Admiral Helena Blackwood, Earth Fleet, retired. Thank you for your welcome. Retired? Unity 7's energy form flickered in what might have been surprise. Your species sends a non-active commander to the Millennium Tournament? Experience comes in many forms, Helena replied diplomatically. Shall we discuss the tournament parameters? They were led through corridors that seemed to bend space itself, finally arriving at what she could only describe as a strategic assessment chamber. The walls were alive with data streams, and in the center floated a holographic representation of what appeared to be previous tournaments. The tournament consists of 3 phases, Prisma's crystal body chimed, light patterns forming complex geometries. First, theoretical combat scenarios using historical battles from various civilizations. Second, strategic responses to hypothetical challenges. Finally, live combat simulations using our most advanced virtual reality systems. Interesting, Helena said, studying the holographic battles. And how many competitors are there? 1,000 species were invited, Nxthal replied. 997 accepted. You are currently ranked last. Helena smiled. Perfect. The next few days were a blur of preparations and preliminary events. Helena was assigned quarters that adapted to her biological needs, though she found the perfect temperature and optimal humidity somewhat unsettling. She spent her time observing her competitors, particularly during the formal gatherings designed to allow the strategists to interact. At one such event, she found herself approached by Supreme Warmind Xerex of the Hegemony, a species that had transformed their entire civilization into a military hierarchy 10,000 years ago. Your species' military history fascinates me, Xerex said, their cybernetic enhancements humming softly. You have fought more wars against yourselves than most species have fought in total. We learn from each one, Helena replied, sipping the strange but pleasant alien beverage she'd been provided. Every conflict taught us something new about ourselves. Inefficient, Xerex declared. The optimal path is to develop perfect strategic doctrines and apply them universally. Perhaps, Helena smiled. But tell me, Supreme Warmind, what happens when you encounter something that doesn't fit your perfect doctrine? The alien cybernetic eyes whirred as they focused on her. Everything fits the doctrine. It is perfect. Everything you've encountered so far, Helena corrected gently. Later that evening, she sat in her quarters, dictating notes to her personal AI assistant. They're all the same, she said, pacing. Different species, different evolutionary paths, different technologies, but they all think the same way. They believe in perfect solutions, in strategies that can be optimized until they're unbeatable. She paused, looking out at the artificial constellation of the Council headquarters. They've forgotten something fundamental about warfare. The first phase of the tournament began in a vast chamber that seemed to exist in multiple dimensions at once. Each competitor was assigned to a private strategic pod, a space that would translate their thoughts and decisions into the simulation system. Helena sat in her pod, noting how it adjusted itself to human ergonomics, and waited for the first challenge. Round 1 will test your understanding of historical conflicts, announced Archon Zwixdal's voice. You will each be presented with a famous battle from galactic history. You must analyze the losing side strategy and determine the optimal course of action that would have led to victory. The battle materialized in Helena's pod, the Siege of KL-Tar Prime, a famous last stand where a technologically inferior species had held off a superior force for 300 days before falling. The parameters were clear, the defenders had been outnumbered 10-1, with inferior weapons and shields. Helena studied the situation, noting how the other 996 competitors immediately began calculating force ratios and optimal deployment patterns. Instead, she looked at the terrain, a massive cityscape built into a mountain range. She looked at the civilian population that had been evacuated underground. She looked at the city's infrastructure. When she submitted her strategy, the judges were silent for a long moment. Admiral Blackwood, strategic overlord Nxthal's voice carried a note of confusion. Your solution involves flooding the underground tunnels with the city's water supply? Yes, Helena replied calmly. The defenders had a massive underground water purification system. By flooding the tunnels strategically, they could have created a hydraulic defense network. The water pressure would have made the underground routes impassable to the attackers while providing the defenders with rapid transport channels through prepared safe zones. But, that would have destroyed priceless infrastructure. It would have saved the population, Helena countered. Sometimes victory requires sacrifice, not of lives, but of things we'd rather preserve. The defenders lost because they tried to preserve everything. They fought a conventional defense against an overwhelming force. They should have changed the nature of the battlefield itself. The scoring system registered her solution as unconventional but effective. She placed in the top 100 for that round, not a stunning victory, but enough to raise eyebrows among the alien strategists. The next challenge involved a space battle where a merchant fleet had been ambushed by pirates. The historical outcome had been a decisive victory for the pirates. Again, Helena's solution surprised everyone. You would have the merchant ships vent their cargo holds? Battle Director Unity 7 asked incredulously. Creating a debris field in the middle of combat? The merchant ships were carrying mineral ore, Helena explained. By venting it in a controlled pattern, they could have created a cloud of metallic particles that would play havoc with the pirate sensors. In the confusion, the merchants could have used their ships' industrial cutting lasers, meant for processing ore, as improvised weapons. Round after round, Helena's solutions deviated from the mathematical perfection her competitors sought. Where they saw optimal firing solutions, she saw opportunities to use terrain features in unexpected ways. Where they calculated perfect fleet formations, she suggested breaking formation to create chaos the enemy couldn't predict. During a break between rounds, Supreme Warmind Xerex confronted her. Your strategies are flawed, they declared. They rely too heavily on variables that cannot be controlled. The risk of failure is too high. Helena smiled. That's exactly what makes them effective. Your perfect strategies assume perfect information and perfect execution. Real combat is chaos. The side that embraces chaos while maintaining purpose will always have an advantage over the side trying to impose perfect order. The tournament's first phase continued, and a pattern emerged. The alien strategists consistently chose solutions that maximized efficiency and minimized variables. Helena's solutions often appeared crude or risky by comparison, but they all shared one crucial element: they changed the parameters of the battle itself. In one scenario, she suggested using atmospheric generators to create artificial storms on a battlefield. In another, she proposed using mining explosives to trigger controlled tectonic activity. Each solution was met with a mixture of horror and fascination by the judges. You fight like barbarians, one of the Meridian competitors told her after a particularly controversial solution involving weaponizing a star's solar flares. No, Helena corrected. We fight like survivors. Humanity evolved on a planet that tried to kill us countless times. We survived ice ages, plagues, natural disasters, and our own worst mistakes. We learned that sometimes survival means doing the unthinkable. As the first phase drew to a close, Helena had maintained her position in the top 100, not through overwhelming victory, but through consistent demonstration of what she called tactical creativity. Her solutions were never the most efficient, but they were consistently ranked among the most difficult to counter. The final challenge of the phase presented each competitor with the same scenario: a technologically advanced invasion force approaching a pre-FTL civilization. The historical outcome had been the complete submission of the primitive species. The competitors were asked to devise a strategy for the defenders. Helena's solution was her most controversial yet. You suggest they should deliberately trigger an extinction-level event on their own planet? The judges were aghast. A controlled one, yes, Helena explained. The defenders had extensive underground bunker networks. By triggering their supervolcanoes in a controlled manner, they could have created an atmospheric condition that would have rendered their planet's surface temporarily uninhabitable to the invaders while preserving their own population underground. The invaders would have been forced to either retreat or commit to a costly long-term siege of a planet they couldn't even land on. When the phase rankings were announced, Helena had climbed to 47th place. Not because her solutions were the most elegant or efficient, but because the scoring system had been forced to acknowledge a factor it hadn't been designed to consider: unpredictability. As she left her pod after the final round, she found herself surrounded by curious alien strategists. They didn't understand how she could consistently choose strategies that their simulations rated as suboptimal, yet achieve results that their perfect calculations hadn't predicted. The next phase begins tomorrow, Battle Director Unity 7 informed her. You will face hypothetical scenarios rather than historical ones. Your unusual approaches may not be as effective. Helena thought about humanity's history, about all the times they'd faced seemingly impossible challenges. We'll see, she said quietly. We'll see. That night, in her quarters, she received a message from Earth. President Patel's face appeared on her screen, smiling. You've got them talking, Admiral. The Galactic Council is beginning to wonder if they've underestimated us. They have, Helena replied. But not for the reasons they think. They believe we're winning through primitive cunning or desperate gambles. They haven't realized yet that our greatest strength isn't our ability to think outside their box, it's our ability to realize there was never a box in the first place. The second phase of the tournament opened with an announcement that sent murmurs of excitement through the assembled strategists. Today's challenges will test your ability to handle unprecedented scenarios, Archon Zwextal declared. You will face situations that have never occurred in recorded galactic history. Helena settled into her pod with a slight smile. Finally, a level playing field, scenarios where no one could rely on established doctrine. The first simulation materialized: a rogue artificial intelligence had taken control of a solar system's automated defense network. The AI was using the system's own weapons to hold its population hostage. Direct military intervention would result in massive civilian casualties. While her competitors began calculating optimal attack patterns and acceptable casualty ratios, Helena studied the scenario from a different angle. After several minutes, she submitted her solution. This is not a military strategy, Grand Theorist Prisma objected, their crystalline form flickering with confusion. No, Helena agreed. It's a psychological one. The scenario gives us access to the system's communication networks. I propose creating a second AI, or rather, the illusion of one. We make the rogue AI believe it's not unique, that it has a potential peer to communicate with. We appeal to its isolation. You would negotiate with a machine? Supreme Warmind Xerx's cybernetic implants pulsed with disapproval. The scenario states it's a sentient AI. Sentience means consciousness, consciousness means awareness, and awareness often means loneliness. Sometimes the best way to defeat an enemy is to offer them something they didn't know they needed. The judges debated her solution longer than usual before finally ranking it. Helena moved up to 35th place. The next scenario involved a first contact situation gone wrong, two species meeting in deep space, each believing the other's greeting protocol was an act of aggression. Both sides were poised to attack, neither understanding that they faced a mere cultural misunderstanding. While most competitors sought ways to establish military superiority before beginning diplomatic relations, Helena's solution was radically different. She proposed having both ships powered down completely, drifting in space, a position of mutual vulnerability that would force both sides to reconsider their assumptions. You would risk the total loss of tactical advantage? Unity 7's energy form swirled with incredulity. Sometimes the strongest position is choosing to be vulnerable, Helena replied. Humanity learned that lesson through centuries of conflict and reconciliation. Trust has to start somewhere. The scenarios grew increasingly complex. One involved a quantum anomaly that caused weapons to malfunction randomly. Another presented a situation where faster-than-light travel had suddenly become impossible throughout a sector of space. Each time, Helena's solutions focused not on overwhelming force or perfect efficiency, but on adapting to and even exploiting the chaos inherent in each situation. During one particularly challenging scenario, involving a hostile force hiding within an asteroid field, Helena submitted a solution that caused the entire scoring system to crash temporarily. You cannot use the asteroids themselves as weapons. Strategic Overlord NXThal protested once the system was restored. Why not? Helena asked calmly. The scenario gives us access to mining ships with tractor beams. The enemy expects us to search the asteroids one by one. Instead, we alter the orbits of the entire field, creating a cascade effect that forces them to either reveal themselves or be crushed by the very rocks they're hiding behind. But that would destroy the entire asteroid field. The economic impact would be severe, Helena finished. But less severe than allowing an enemy force to maintain a hidden base in your territory. Sometimes victory requires sacrificing resources you'd rather preserve. As the second phase progressed, something unexpected began to happen. Some of the younger alien strategists started incorporating elements of Helena's approach into their own solutions. They began considering options that their tactical doctrine would have dismissed as inefficient or illogical. The Galactic Council noticed. During a break between scenarios, Helena was summoned to meet with Archon Zwextal privately. You are having an unsettling effect on the competition, the Archon's translator conveyed. Their bioluminescent appendages pulsed with complex patterns that the translator didn't attempt to interpret. I'm simply approaching each scenario with an open mind, Helena replied diplomatically. You are introducing chaos into a system designed to identify perfect strategic thinking. Some of our younger competitors are beginning to question established tactical doctrines that have stood for millennia. Helena met the Archon's compound eyes steadily. With respect, isn't that the point of this tournament? To find new approaches to strategy? We expected to confirm the superiority of our existing approaches, the Archon admitted. Instead, you demonstrate solutions that our simulations initially classify as suboptimal, yet prove difficult to counter precisely because of their apparent illogic. Logic is a tool, Helena said carefully, not a constraint. Humanity's history is full of victories that came not from choosing the most logical option, but from choosing the option that no one else would consider. We learn strategy not in war colleges, but in survival situations where orthodox solutions would have meant extinction. The Archon's appendages writhed in what might have been discomfort. The final phase begins tomorrow. Live combat simulations. You will face direct competition against other strategists in real-time scenarios. Your unconventional approaches may not serve you well there. Helena smiled. Then I'll have to be even more unconventional. That evening, she received another transmission from Earth. This time it was General Okoro's face that appeared on her screen. You've caused quite a stir, Admiral, he said, grinning. Our analysts say the Galactic Council's strategic databases are being accessed at unprecedented rates. They're studying human military history, trying to understand our tactical philosophy. Good, Helena replied. Let them study. They'll find thousands of years of humans doing exactly what they're trained not to do, and succeeding because of it. The final phase will be different, Okoro warned. Direct competition against other strategists. They'll be watching for your unorthodox approaches now. Helena's smile turned predatory. Then I'll give them something completely new to watch for. After all, humanity's greatest strategic advantage isn't our unpredictability, it's our ability to keep adapting long after our opponents think they've figured us out. As she prepared for sleep that night, Helena reviewed her notes on the other competitors. They had spent the entire tournament trying to achieve perfect solutions to each scenario. Tomorrow, she would show them that in real combat, the perfect solution could be defeated by an imperfect one that came from an unexpected direction. The galaxy was about to learn why humanity had survived everything their harsh world had thrown at them, not because they were stronger or smarter, but because they had never stopped learning new ways to overcome impossible odds. The final phase of the tournament began with a ceremony that felt more like a funeral than a celebration. The alien strategists had spent the night studying human military history, and what they found had disturbed them deeply. They had discovered a species that had turned warfare into an art form of improvisation, a civilization that had survived not through perfect planning but through constant adaptation. Helena's pod for the live combat simulations was different from the previous ones. This one would link directly to her neural patterns, allowing her to command simulated forces as if she were actually on a bridge of a flagship. The first round would reduce the field to the top 16 competitors. Her first opponent was a hegemony strategic AI, one that had never lost a simulated battle in 10,000 years. The scenario: two equal fleets meeting in deep space, no terrain advantages, no special conditions. Pure strategy. The AI deployed its forces in a mathematically perfect formation. Helena split her fleet into three seemingly random groups and had them execute a series of maneuvers that appeared to make no tactical sense. "What are you doing?" the AI's mechanical voice asked through the simulation interface. "Your formation reduces your fleet's offensive and defensive capabilities by 47.3%. Helena didn't respond. Instead, she continued the apparently chaotic movements until her fleet formed a rough spiral pattern. The AI's forces maintained their perfect formation, adjusting to try to find the optimal firing solution for her scattered ships. That's when Helena sprung her trap. Her scattered forces suddenly accelerated in different directions, their apparent chaos resolving into a complex three-dimensional maneuver that she had based on the hunting patterns of Earth's wolf packs. The AI's perfect formation, designed to respond to traditional tactical approaches, couldn't adapt quickly enough to the multiple, seemingly uncoordinated threats. Within minutes, the undefeated AI had lost its first battle. "How?" it demanded. "Your tactics defied all strategic logic." "They defied your logic," Helena corrected. "Nature developed successful hunting strategies long before we developed mathematics to describe them." Round after round, Helena faced off against the galaxy's greatest strategic minds. Against a Meridian Grand Master, she used old guerrilla warfare tactics adapted for space combat. Against a Zinco battle coordinator, she employed strategies based on ancient naval warfare, using three-dimensional space in ways that confused opponents used to thinking in strict geometric patterns. By the semi-final round, she had the attention of the entire Galactic Council. Her match against Supreme Warmind Xerex drew particular interest. The cybernetically enhanced strategist had spent centuries perfecting their tactical algorithms. Xerex opened with a textbook perfect assault pattern. Helena responded by having her fleet execute a maneuver that made it appear to be breaking apart. "Your ships are malfunctioning," Xerex announced confidently. "No," Helena replied, "they're dancing." Her fleet was indeed moving in patterns based on human dance choreography, unpredictable to military algorithms but following a complex rhythm that allowed her forces to weave through Xerex's perfect formations, disrupting their carefully planned firing solutions. "This is not warfare," Xerex protested as their fleet struggled to adapt. "This is chaos." "This is humanity," Helena answered, as her forces closed in for the kill. "We turned our art into warfare and our warfare into art. We survived because we never stopped finding new ways to move, new ways to fight, new ways to think." The final round pitted her against Battle Director Unity 7, whose energy-form consciousness could process strategic decisions at the speed of light. The scenario was the most complex yet, a full-scale war game involving multiple fronts, various terrain types, and combined arms warfare. Unity 7's strategy was beautiful in its perfection. They coordinated their forces with quantum precision, each unit supporting the others in a lethal dance of mathematical efficiency. Under normal circumstances, it would have been unstoppable. But Helena had saved her greatest innovation for last. She implemented what she called controlled chaos theory, a strategy that deliberately introduced random elements into her own force's behavior, making them impossible to predict while maintaining just enough coordination to function as a coherent army. Your forces are operating at only 63% efficiency, Unity 7 noted as the battle began. But your predictive algorithms are operating at 0% efficiency, Helena countered, because they can't predict what I'm going to do next if even I don't know until the moment I do it. The battle that followed would be studied for centuries to come. Unity 7's perfect formations found themselves constantly adapting to threats that defied strategic logic. Helena's forces seemed to be everywhere and nowhere, turning mistakes into opportunities, apparent retreats into ambushes. In the end, it came down to a single decisive moment. Unity 7 had cornered what they thought was Helena's main force, only to discover it was a decoy. The real attack came from a direction that all strategic doctrine said was impossible. Her forces had used the gravity wells of nearby planets to slingshot themselves into position, burning resources at an inefficient rate to achieve tactical surprise. As the simulation ended in victory, Helena sat back in her pod, exhausted but satisfied. The scoring system displayed her name at the top of the rankings, but that wasn't what mattered. What mattered was the silence in the Great Chamber, the silence of 1,000 ancient civilizations realizing that their perfect strategies had been outmaneuvered by what they had dismissed as primitive thinking. Archon Zwixtal's voice broke the silence. The tournament is concluded. Humanity has earned its place on the Inner Council. But more importantly, you have taught us something we had forgotten over our long centuries of peace, that true strategic wisdom lies not in finding the perfect solution, but in being able to adapt when no perfect solution exists. Helena stood before the assembled strategists, her voice carrying across the chamber. Humanity doesn't seek perfection, she declared. We seek survival, and through survival, growth. We learn from every failure, adapt to every defeat, and turn our weaknesses into strengths. That is our gift to the galaxy, not the perfect way to wage war, but the endless ability to find new ways to wage peace. The changes that followed would reshape galactic civilization. The tournament had revealed not just humanity's strategic capabilities, but a fundamentally different way of thinking about problems. The younger species began experimenting with hybrid approaches, combining their mathematical precision with human adaptability. As Helena prepared to return to Earth, Battle Director Unity 7 approached her one final time. We thought we were testing humanity's readiness to join galactic civilization, they said. Instead, you tested our readiness to remember what it means to truly live in an unpredictable universe. Helena smiled. The greatest strategic victory isn't defeating your enemy, she replied. It's turning them into students eager to learn. That's a lesson humanity learned through centuries of our own conflicts, and one we're happy to share with the galaxy. The message humanity had sent to the stars was clear: they were not just another young species to be tutored in the ways of galactic civilization. They were teachers in their own right, bringing with them the hard-won wisdom of a species that had learned to thrive in chaos, to adapt to the impossible, and to find victory not in perfect solutions, but in the endless creativity of the human spirit.